Rushanara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When we entered the pandemic, the government, led by the Prime Minister, rightly called on the British people to do the right thing and protect each other by following the law, following the rules. And it is why this affair has been so devastating for so many of us, including my constituents. All of us, in different ways, have had to make sacrifices. Some of us lost loved ones and have not been able to mourn properly because of the restrictions. And that applies to so many of our constituents up and down the country. And I know that from first-hand experience, when in my own family we lost friends and relatives and were not able to see their family members or attend services or bereave with family members and support them. So today I want to highlight a few cases of the many that wrote to me over this affair. Craig wrote to me about his grandmother. He said, "My grandmother was my best friend. She was admitted to hospital on the day the first cases of COVID were identified in the UK. She died in hospital in early June 2020. She spent the vast majority of her time in hospital alone, confused, with no visitors. It is terrible for us all that the first lockdown, COVID lockdown, will be forever remembered as one of the worst times of my life. I and the rest of my family closely adhered to all lockdown advice and the new laws put in place. My nan's funeral took place the week the Prime Minister's birthday party was held. We were only allowed a handful of people in the service. Most of our family and friends forced to line the streets outside the crematorium. I cried while writing this email to you, reliving these memories. I cannot allow the Prime Minister and this government to rewrite the history of the pandemic and dismiss our collective trauma as just a slice of cake or no worse than a speeding ticket. The nation should not be gaslit into thinking that the pandemic was not so bad." Another constituent said, "My mother was taken into hospital for a blood test in 2020, a week after the lockdown began. The test showed she needed treatment before she could come home, but we were given the totally unexpected news that she only had days to live. This devastating news was made worse because my father, who was then almost 90 years of age, and my 3 sisters and I knew that the lockdown rules meant that we would not be able to see my mother again and that she would die, as she did 2 days later, with no one from her family with her. So how do you think my father, my sisters and I felt when the news broke of the partying in number 10? While we were adhering to the rules so strictly, I now feel even more angry when I hear government ministers, who I would hope would have some standards of integrity, coming forward on an almost daily basis to say that it's not an important matter, that the Prime Minister's not to blame, that he has apologised, so that makes it all right. I hadn't intended to write to you, but what has led me to do so is ministers comparing Partygate to parking and speeding fines, and the fact that the Prime Minister is going to issue another apology, another full apology, as though that will make it all right. For me, it doesn't. Another constituent said, "I just wanted to add my voice to those asking the Prime Minister's resignation. I buried my mother about a week before he attended that party that broke the law. We couldn't even hug at the funeral, which only allowed 10 attendees. No political story has ever made me this furious. I feel like I've been scammed by my own government, taken for an absolute fool for obeying the very laws they set. If the Prime Minister can't even uphold a standard so basic as the rule of law, what are we as a country?" Madam Deputy Speaker, the final story I'll share is of a health and social care worker. She said, "I know firsthand the impact COVID's had on vulnerable people on the front line. We should not be living in a country where there is one rule for the Prime Minister and government ministers and another one for everyone else. These are voices of pain amid so many messages, emails, cards and letters. Voices of agony and sacrifice, so many cries of pain from the British people. The British people deserve better. We rose so magnificently to tackle the pandemic as the public. We need to make sure that this motion is supported today. That's why I'll be supporting the motion, and I'm glad that some members opposite are supporting it, and I hope others hear the voices of people up and down the country and support this motion today.